Hey there! You've decided to buy a new home. Fantastic! You've come to the right place. Today we're going to cover 5 steps for buying a new home. So let's go ahead. Let's get started. Okay, thanks for joining in on 5 steps to buying a new home. If you would please, before we get started, if you'd hit the subscribe button and the like button, it helps my channel, helps to continue it growing, and helps me to continue putting out these informative videos for everyone. So let's go ahead, let's get started on number 1. Apply for a mortgage. I know what you're saying, no, we're not ready to apply for a mortgage yet. We've got other things to do. Well, no, you do need to apply for a mortgage right away. Because the bottom line is you really don't know what you can afford until you apply for the mortgage and the lender tells you how much money they will give you. Of course, you may be eligible for a lot more money than what you really want to spend, but by the same token, you may find out the bad news that you really can't get approved for the amount of money that you want to spend. Another reason for getting pre-approved right away is there may be something lurking in your credit that you don't know about. It might be an old medical bill or some other type of bill that got lost in the mail that you never received. I've seen that happen before in the past where there's a 10-year-old bill that no one ever knew about until the mortgage underwriters started really looking deep into the people's credit and they found it. It can cause delays, etc., in getting those things taken care of. So that's another good reason. Also, you cannot really submit a serious offer without a proof of funds attached to it. You will need the letter from the lender to show that you actually will have the money when the day comes for closing. There are different types of lenders. There are mortgage brokers, there are credit unions, large banks, local banks, online lenders. There's a whole list of the different types of lenders. They all have their own advantages and disadvantages. My own personal opinion is that I prefer a mortgage broker. The biggest reason that I prefer mortgage brokers is service. It's highly likely that you will get that lender's cell phone number. So you can call them after hours, you can call them on the weekend, and other people, such as listing agents, can call them as well to check on you. That's important. If you go with a large bank or any of the other institutions really that I noted before, they will only do business during normal business hours. Well, most real estate transactions take place in the evening or on the weekends, so it's important to be able to get in touch with the lender whenever possible. Now, of course, those other lenders, they have advantages as well that they will hit you with, and they will give you ideas on better fees, that sort of things. But the best thing to do is shop around. Within a 30-day period, you can apply for several mortgages and it will not hurt your credit. It's not like going out and applying for 5 credit cards all at once. That's really going to hurt your credit. You can apply for multiple mortgages within that 30-day period and not damage your credit score. The pre-approval that you get will typically last anywhere from 60 to 90 days, depending on the lender, but it's really not that big of a deal to get it renewed. You just simply call them and they will typically just run your credit again, make sure that you're still employed, maybe ask for a recent pay stub, and then it will get renewed and you'll just get a new letter for what you had before, as long as no changes took place. That being said, once you apply for a mortgage and once you get the process moving, don't go take on any more new credit. That's not good. That will just set everything back and start everything from zero. So if you plan to buy anything on credit, don't. I've got another video that I will share at the end of this video that covers mortgages in greater detail. But just keep in mind, step number 1, you must apply for a mortgage. Okay, step 2, find a realtor to work with. Now, as a buyer, there's really no reason not to work with a realtor because the seller pays the realtor's fees. So the realtor comes to you at no cost. It's likely that this is the biggest transaction of your life so far. So you really should have a professional helping you out with it. There are all kinds of pieces to this puzzle. There are documents, there are amendments, there are negotiations that need to take place, there are regulations that need to be followed. So please take the steps to get a good realtor and use a good realtor throughout this transaction. Take care of them. So, how do you find a good realtor? Well, there's a realtor on every corner, right? Everybody knows a realtor. If you don't know a realtor, you probably know somebody that knows a realtor. You're going to ask your aunt and she's going to say, "Oh, geez, Susie from church, she's a great realtor. You should really do business with her." And maybe she is a great realtor. But you really need to interview these realtors and talk to them before you go jumping in with them. I made that mistake many years ago before I was in real estate, went with a very inexperienced realtor that cost me money in the end and cost me a lot of time. There are a number of questions that you can ask a realtor to find out if you really want to work with them or not, and see if you can build a rapport. One of the biggest ones is, how long have you been a realtor? That's not necessarily a great indication because there are a lot of realtors that only sell 1 or 2 houses per year. So Susie from church, she may have been a realtor for 10 years, but she may have only sold 1 house per year during that time and has only sold a total of 10 houses. You're better off going with someone that's a professional realtor that doesn't do it part-time, that sells a good number of houses per year and is experienced in the transactions and knows the contracts and the details of how it's going to transpire. Another good question to ask is, what did they do before real estate? Typically, people that are in real estate, they don't do it as their first career. It's not really something that people jump into right out of college or right out of high school. It's something that's done later on in life, for the most part. It could be their second, it could be their third or fourth career. Who knows? But what they did prior to real estate can really have an impact on how good of a real estate agent they are. Do they have a good technical knowledge? Do they know how air conditioners work? Do they know how homes are built? Do they know how electrical systems and plumbing systems work? Do they know the structure of a home? Can they walk around it and identify different problems? Those are all important things that you want to have in a real estate agent. Did they have any sales or negotiation experience prior to real estate? They may have been a teacher. They may have been in IT. They may have been a dental assistant. All great professions, but do they really transfer over to being a great real estate agent? Ask how many homes they typically sell in a year. That will tell you how current they are when it comes to contracts and other elements of the transaction. Do they typically specialize in listings or do they specialize in buyers? Personally, I believe that a good real estate agent is well-rounded. That particular agent, although they're representing you on the buyer's side, has experience as a listing agent as well. That allows them to think along the lines of a listing agent and know the mindset of the listing agent that's on the other side of the transaction. That's very important, especially when it comes down to a negotiation. Look the person up on the state agency website. I'm sure they're listed on there. It will probably list the education that they have, the continuing education that they normally do. Will list if they have any violations or anything negative along. Obviously, you can get on Google, Yelp, any of the big real estate sites and research them there and see what you find out. And one other thing, don't tolerate a pushy realtor. If you're going into a house with a realtor and they're saying, "Oh, this is the house for you. Oh, you need to buy this house. This is perfect for you. I can tell," then that's not really the realtor you want to deal with. A good realtor won't sell you a house. They will give you the education so that you can make the decision yourself. Also, don't let these realtors force you into an agreement that you don't want. If they're trying to ram an agreement down your throat and saying that they won't work with you unless you have an agreement, well, that's fine. Find another one. I personally don't use agreements until we get up to the contract stage. And the main reason for that is I don't want you to work with me because we have an agreement. I want you to work with me because you see the value in what I do and you want to continue working with me to find your home. That's what a good realtor does, in my opinion. There are some brokers out there that will require you to give a deposit of $250, $500 just for them to be your buyer's agent. When someone asks you for money, just run away. find someone else. There are plenty of people out there that are going to do it for nothing. If you're watching this video and you're not in North Texas, look down below. You can contact me. I have a network of agents all over the United States that I've referred previously. I may know a realtor or be able to easily find a realtor for you in the area where you live. So don't hesitate. Just reach out. I'm happy to help you out. Number 3, look for a house. I know, that's like, really? Obvious? Sure, we'll go look for a house. But it's important to cover this and cover the elements of a house that you really need to pay attention to when you're out looking. Again, this is where a good realtor will really help you out in pointing things out regarding the home. Of course, you need to determine the area and your budget. You got your budget when you applied for the loan and found out what you can afford and the amount of money that you can get. But also look at other things such as the school district. Many people say, oh, the school district doesn't matter to me because I don't have any children. But it does matter to you when it comes to resale. And resale is a big piece of buying a home because one day you are going to need to sell that home. You don't want to have a home that no one else wants to buy. Things to consider in resale value, obviously school district, as I said, location. Are there railroad tracks running right behind the house or just 2 or 3 blocks over? And they're going to blow the horn at all hours because there's a crossing nearby. Is there a giant power line running behind the house or right near the house? Those are a negative to a lot of people and can really affect resale value more than most people realize. Other things are traffic patterns. If you're in a subdivision and the home that you're looking at is right near the front of the subdivision and every car that comes into the subdivision has to go by the house, that can be a negative as well. Of course, you may not have children, so that doesn't bother you. But it could bother potential buyers in the future that do have small children and would worry about them playing out in the yard, riding their bikes in the street, etc., etc. Some of the positives to consider are obviously parks, playgrounds, swimming pools. Many neighborhoods have all those things right in the neighborhood. If one of those is right down the street from the house that you're considering, then hey, that's great. Hiking, biking trails, HOAs. Now, of course, an HOA to some people is a negative, to other people is a positive. Some people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but I consider an HOA to be a positive in a neighborhood. They typically help to keep the neighborhood nicer, keep people on top of their homes, make sure their bushes are trimmed, their yards are cut, their trees are trimmed, etc. I have found that the vast majority of people that have problems with HOAs are people that continually violate the rules and get letters. That's just the way that I am, and again, I'm sure people are going to get mad when I say that. Now, should you consider a home that requires some updates, or are you looking for something that is fully updated and ready to go? Now, in the current market, the ones that are fully updated and ready to go, those are very competitive and difficult to get at times, depending on where you are and what the market is. Here in Texas, those are hard to come by. I really am a firm believer in finding a home that if you can, and you don't mind doing some painting, you don't mind doing a little research and replacing floors as you go along, replacing light fixtures, especially if you're a do-it-yourself type person, then buy a home that needs those updates. You can probably get a better deal on it, and you'll be able to build some sweat equity in the home over the time that you live there without spending as much money as you would if you bought a home that was already done. This brings to light the whole flip home situation. With HGTV and all these other TV shows that depict people that are making a ton of money flipping homes, which really isn't accurate. There's a lot of homes out there that have got fresh paint, they've got new countertops, they've got new floors. But believe me, I see a lot of these homes before they ever get flipped. And a lot of those cracks in the walls, a lot of those structural issues and things, they're hidden and you don't know that they're there. So be very cautious when you're looking at a flip home. Make sure that you hire a good inspector to go over it to find out what exactly is there before you go diving into a home that was recently flipped. That brings about looking at expensive items. things like the air conditioning, the roof, the foundation. A lot of people will come to me and they say, well, I don't want a house that's any more than 15 years old. Okay, I understand that. But what you need to really look at is not necessarily the age of the home itself, but the age of the appliances and components within the house. I've had many people that they say, no, I don't want a house that's any older than 15 years. And we'll go look at a home that's 11 years old, and they're really happy that it's only 11 years old. But the reality is nothing has been replaced in it. And contractor grade appliances, air conditioners, hot water heaters, etc., they're all only designed to last about 10 to 12 years. So if you buy a home that's 12 years old and nothing has been replaced, the chances are good you're going to be replacing all that stuff soon after you move into the home. Those are some serious expenses that you don't want to take on. So make sure that you understand and know the age of all the significant components in the home. Also, the roof, the foundation. The roofs here in Texas don't last very long. If you find one that's 7, 8, 10 years old, that's rather rare because we have so much hail here that it ruins the roofs. Now, that being said, if you do find a home and the roof is older, 7, 8, 10 years old, and it's inspected and it looks great and everything's fantastic, you may feel that's good. However, you need to talk to your insurance agent about that, because many times on older roofs like that, insurance companies will not insure them, or they insure them at a very low rate. So make sure you understand what your insurance coverage is on an older roof such as that. The foundation is another significant issue that you really need to look at. In North Texas, we have mostly slab foundations, and they move around a lot over time. They droop, they crack, the house droops. A lot of different things happen with them. One of the most common things that you'll find is someone says, oh, we had foundation work done, and it has a lifetime warranty on it now. Well, the foundation doesn't have a lifetime warranty on it. Only the work that was done by that company has a warranty on it. Nothing more. And is that company even still in business? Who was that company? Are they really all that great? I've seen too many that they say that it's a lifetime warranty. And when the foundation company comes out to take on that warranty claim, they always say that the house needs more piers underneath of it. So be careful of that. Be careful who you're dealing with. If you see that there may be a foundation issue with the home, it would be smart money to hire an engineer and have the engineer analyze the house and give you an idea of what kind of problems you could possibly be looking at. Okay, let's move on to number 4, which is the actual buying process itself. Now, let me throw a little disclaimer in here. I'm an agent in Texas, and what I'm going to be talking about here pertains mostly to Texas, but also pertains to many other states. The nomenclature may be different. Some of the words may be different. Obviously, the contracts will be different, but it will probably flow much in the same way. So when you make an offer for a home, you make it using the actual contract for sale. It's not a letter or a phone call or anything like that. You will actually sign a contract saying that you want to buy that home. And that contract will be what governs the entire transaction. Once the offer is submitted, the sellers will look it over. Chances are they will either reject it completely or they will give you a counter offer back. And then that's where the two agents will get together, negotiate the transaction, and get it executed. Executed means everyone has signed it. Both the buyer and the seller have signed it. Now, the date of execution is very important because many other things are based off of that. Once the contract is executed, you will need to pay 2 different sums of money. You will need to pay earnest money, which is typically 1% of the sale price of the home, and you will need to pay option money, or whatever it's called in the state where you live. And that option money will lock down the house for you so that you have a period where you can inspect it. Now, the option period, as it's known, is typically anywhere from 5 to 10 days. And once you pay that option money, you're not going to get it back. If you continue on with the purchase of the home it will be credited towards the purchase of the home. But if you change your mind and you don't want the house anymore, then you will lose that money, whatever it is, $250, $500, depending on the value of the home, maybe as much as $1,000 or $1,500. But keep that in mind before you make that decision. The other money that you're going to pay is earnest money, and that money is usually 1% of the value of the home. That money is paid to the title company and held in escrow, meaning they're a neutral third party holding on to the money. That money will also go towards the purchase of the home. Now, if certain things happen during the contract, it gets terminated either during option period or for other reasons that are within the terms of the contract, then you should be able to get that earnest money back. So let's talk a little bit about the option period and what you're going to do during that option period. The first thing you should do is hire a licensed inspector to come and look at the house. That's a very, very important step. The inspector will come, they will go through the house with a fine-tooth comb, and they'll write a report. Now, I always recommend to my clients to meet the inspector at the home near the end of the inspection so that they can go over everything with the home that the inspector saw. Keep in mind, these inspectors are just as fearful as attorneys as everyone else is. They don't want to get sued. So they're going to write a report that if you didn't see the house, you're probably going to think the house is about to collapse. They're going to write up everything that they can possibly find with that house. So that's really why it's super important for you to meet with the inspector, go over the house, because once they walk around and they show you all these things that they found with the house, so many of them you'll be able to look at and say, oh, well, I can just go to Home Depot and in an hour I've got that taken care of. It's not that big of a deal. But if you were just to read it remotely and not see it, it may scare you off. Once you clear the option period, then other things will get moved into motion. The finance company, the lender, will really start digging even deeper into your finances at this point. It's called underwriting. And they're going to look at everything, every dollar you spent, every bit of credit that you have. They're going to look at your employment. They're really going to dig deep. And that's probably going to take about 10 to 15 days for them to get through all of that. They want to make sure that you are very creditworthy before you buy this home. Something that they will do is they will order an appraisal. Now, the appraiser does not work for the lender. The appraiser is a neutral third party that the lender doesn't even pick. They simply go to an appraisal management company and order an appraisal. That's put out into a pool, and an appraiser picks it up and goes and does the appraisal. The appraisal will most likely be based on recent sales near that home of similar type homes. This can be good, this can be bad. You really never know. But you should be protected in the contract where if the home doesn't appraise, then you can terminate the contract. Of course, you're out the money that you spent up to that point, but at least you're protected and you don't get stuck with something and lose your earnest money. It's an ability to get out your earnest money. Appraisals for VA and FHA loans are more stringent than conventional loans are. It's really because the government's involved and the government's backing the whole thing. They're not super stringent, but they're going to look more closely at things like the roof, the foundation, major issues that the house may have that would affect the value of the home if you happen to default. Something else that will be taking place is research on the title. This is where the title company comes in. They're going to research the background of that particular piece of property as far back as they can in the county records. And they're going to make sure that there aren't any liens on the property, that every sale that took place over the course of the history of the property was done properly and everything transferred correctly. You don't want someone showing up on your doorstep a year after you've moved in saying, you don't really own this home. This is sitting on my grandpa's farm, and when my grandpa's farm was sold, it wasn't sold correctly, so I own this land. You don't want that to happen. The title company will issue what's called title insurance, and that insures you against what I just described happening. So if it does happen, the title insurance will kick in and they will protect you. They will provide legal representation and protect your interests throughout that whole title process. So because they're insuring it and they're issuing the policy, you can be assured that they are going to go over your title extremely closely and make sure that everything is square and that there isn't anything outstanding on it. I always feel safe when a good title company that I know and that I work with goes over the title and makes sure everything's right. If there's an HOA in the neighborhood, a homeowners association, then there will be documents required from the HOA. Typically, there are 2 documents required. There's a resale certificate that says that the current owner of the home, the seller, does not owe the HOA any money. And also, they will provide the covenants of the HOA, which is really the rules and regulations. In Texas, this may not apply in other states. In Texas, once the buyer receives the HOA documents, they have 3 days to terminate the contract if they don't like the HOA. So there is some protection there. If you're outside of Texas, be sure to ask your realtor how this situation works with the HOA, the documentation you should receive, and if you can terminate the contract if you don't like the HOA rules. After all this is done, the lender will eventually provide what they call a clear to close, meaning they've done everything, all the documents are straight, the title is straight, and it's ready to close. Now, 3 days before the closing, they will issue what's called a closing disclosure or a HUD-1 document, depending on the title company and the lender as to what they use, but they have basically the same information on them. And it will have 2 columns, a buyer column and a seller column, and debits and credits on both sides of those. And it really outlines exactly who's paying for what in the transaction, how much money you're going to need to bring to the closing table, how much money the seller is going to net. It just outlines every penny of the entire transaction. As I said, by law, you are required to receive that 3 days before closing. Make sure you go over that very closely and understand every single line item on it. You may need to call your realtor. You may need to call your lender. You may need to call the title company. But make sure you understand every line item. I have caught mistakes on closing disclosures as much as $10,000 before, where something was just put in the wrong column. So it's very important to look that over closely. During this process, from the time you start until you get to closing, don't take on any new credit. If you go to Kohl's and you're buying new pants and they offer you a 20% discount if you sign up for one of their credit cards, don't do it. It's going to cost you a whole lot more than the 20% on those pants. So do not take on any new credit. Okay, let's move on to the final one, number 5, and that's closing. There are several things you need to do in order to prepare for closing. Number 1, you will need to get homeowners insurance. And this is an important part of the home buying process, is the homeowners insurance. You can call 5 different insurance companies and they will give you 5 different quotes. Don't just pick the cheapest one and go with that. There are a lot of different factors to homeowners insurance that you need to know and you need to understand before you buy it. So for each quote that you get, ask for a declaration page or the deck sheet that outlines how that policy works and what that policy covers. The biggest thing to look at that insurance companies use to lower their costs is the deductible. If you're not familiar with the deductible on homeowners policies, it's typically a percentage of the value of the home. So if you have a $300,000 home and it has a 1% deductible on it, that's $3,000 out of your pocket. Whenever you make a claim, you have to pay that $3,000 first. I've seen people that got the cheapest insurance they could from large carriers, and they thought they were getting a great deal until they made a claim and they found out that they actually had 5% deductible. I knew some people that had a $200,000 home. They got cheap insurance from a major carrier, had 5% deductible on it, so they had a $10,000 deductible on that home, which they didn't have. Other things to look at are coverage for water damage. There are caps on a lot of the coverage. Water damage is a big one. They will cap it at $5,000 or $10,000. So make sure when you get all these quotes, sit down and go over the declaration sheets on every one of those quotes and compare them. Make sure they're apples to apples. The quote that is the middle of the road quote may actually be the best insurance that you can get. So make sure you understand all of those elements of the homeowner's insurance. Utilities. You're going to need to get the utilities turned on. The seller should be able to give you the information of all the different providers so that you can get the electricity, the water, the trash, all those types of things turned on. Make sure you get ahead of that and do that at least a week before closing, because sometimes there are delays, especially if there's gas involved and the gas company has to come out and test the home, that sort of thing. That varies from place to place. Make arrangements for a moving company, whether it will be you and your friends with a U-Haul or actually hiring a moving company. Should look into that a couple of weeks beforehand so that you can get those things reserved. Weekends are the busiest time for the rental companies and the movers because that's when everybody wants to move. So make sure you don't get caught out, end up with a less than stellar, let's say, moving company that's going to damage your equipment, that sort of thing. So get ahead of that. When it comes time to go to the closing, you'll need to bring your ID and you'll need to bring money. The closing disclosure, the final one, will tell you the exact number down to the penny that you need to bring for the closing. I recommend to all my clients that they use a cashier's check versus a wire transfer. It seems that there are a lot of scammers out there, thieves, that really know how to work the title companies. Somehow they get into their email, whatever, and they actually duplicate the email and send you an email the day before or whatever that says, oh, by the way, we changed our bank account. This is where you need to transfer the money to now. So that's why I just simply recommend for everyone, if you bring a cashier's check, you hand it over and it's a done deal. You don't have to worry about the fraud. When you go to the closing, there will be a lot of documents for you to sign once you sit down at the closing table. Probably an inch thick, an inch and a half thick, depending on the lender and the state and what the requirements are. The closer will go over everything with you with each piece of paper and explain it to you. But if you want to read everything, I suggest that you request all those documents at least a day ahead of time, maybe 2 days ahead of time. That gives you time to read all the documents, and if you have questions, you can ask the questions so that you fully understand them. Keep in mind, you're not going to be able to change anything. If you want to change something or whatever, then that's just going to delay everything, and those documents are not going to be changed. But at least if you take the time, you can read them, you can understand what you're signing. But please don't wait until the day of closing to sit down there at the table and read every single document. That takes a lot of time, and you'll be rushed, and you probably won't understand it, and you won't have the chance to really ask questions to the people that can answer the questions for you. Once everything is signed and you're all done, you still don't quite own the home until it funds, or as we call it, funding. So what happens is once all the documents are signed, they get sent off to the lender. The lender reviews the documents, and once everything is right, which usually takes about an hour to 2 hours depending on the lender, then they will release the funds. And at that point, it's all yours. You've bought a home. So congratulations. You've just done probably the biggest transaction in your life, but look at what you've purchased. A great home where you're going to live hopefully for several years very happily, and hopefully gain some equity in it and make some money when it's time to sell and move on to the next bigger home. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. All of my contact information is in the description below. You can make comments. I do my best to keep up with the comments and answer them, keep people informed. I'm always happy to help, so don't hesitate. I have these other videos available that you can click on for more information, and there are many other videos on my channel itself to help you throughout your process of buying a new home, finding a new home, deciding where you're going to live. So please go ahead, as I asked before, subscribe to my channel. I'll do everything I can to help you out. And once again, Congratulations! I hope you enjoyed this video and you'll come back for more informative content about North Texas real estate. Have a great day.